Today's show is brought to you by Southpaw Customs. Southpaw Customs is the official apparel brand of the Rachel Run Show. Southpaw Customs also designs and prints one-of-a-kind shirts, hoodies, and tumblers for large and small orders for businesses and individual orders. Visit spcustoms6.com. That's www.spcustoms6.com and tell Erica Rachel sent you. Also, make sure you help the show and purchase your official Rachel Runs gear by visiting www.spcustoms6.com and click on the Rachel Runs link. The Rachel Runs podcast is also brought to you by EBR Studio out of Feasterville, Pennsylvania. EBR Studio focuses on weddings, events, portrait, and product photography. EBR Studio is also the master at doing promo shoots and ad campaigns. I'm talking to you businesses and influencers. They are published worldwide, I know, because I've been on a few covers. If you have a wedding or event coming up, or if you're in the market for portraits or promo shots, go to www.ebrstudio.com. That's www.ebrstudio.com. Tell Bill Rachel sent you. EBR Studio is my official photographer and the official photographer of the Rachel Runs Show. As you know, we're all about health and wellness here. I have a great new product for you. You've probably heard of it and seen it on Instagram. It's called Liquid IV. I've actually been using it for years, back when they were a smaller company. Now I'm blessed enough to be working with them. If you haven't tried it before, it is a great add-in to your water that you just mix with your water bottle. And one water bottle with one packet of Liquid IV, just one packet, is like drinking 3 water bottles. So it really is a hydration multiplier. This is fantastic for runners, athletes, and anybody that works out. Mix it in your water bottle before you go to the gym. Use it on your long runs, and runners in the summertime. This stuff is great. Now, best part is they've given me a really, really good promo code. All caps, Rachel_runs will get you not only 25% off your whole order, but free shipping. I don't know about you guys, but free shipping is like a big thing of mine with online shopping. So make sure you use my promo code, all caps, Rachel_runs. It's the same as my Instagram handle, and you will get 25% off and free shipping on your Liquid IV order.
T-minus 60 seconds and counting. Coming up on a go for all the sequence start. T-minus 17 seconds and counting. 15, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, start, 2, 1, boost ignition, and liftoff.
I can't go to Taco Bell. I'm on an all-carb diet. God, Karen, you are so stupid.
Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Rachel Runs. This week's guest is ultra runner and all-around badass Michele Harmeling. She is joining us all the way from Alaska, and for reference, it's about 7:45 here in New Jersey. And Michele, what time is it where you are?
It is 3:43 and a half, so we're a good 4 hours behind you. Hi, Tinkerbell.
Yes, Tinkerbell's joining us again. Now, for everybody listening, we actually attempted to tape this episode last week and had all kinds of fun audio and visual problems. So we just used it as a warm-up, and we are retaping tonight. Now, again, I found it so fascinating where you live. It's just so different from the rest of the world. And I don't think a lot of people ever take the time to think about that. I mean, most people have normal daytime and normal nighttime. You do not. For how many months of the year you're in complete darkness and then goes to lightness?
So usually right around now, it does not get dark at night at all. We have what's called civil twilight, which basically just means the sun is below the horizon. But it's still totally light out. So if you have pets or children, don't expect them to come home and go to bed. That's not a thing. Ours started using the threat I don't have to go to sleep. It's still light outside like a month ago. So that usually lasts till, late August, and then we start heading into um fall, which doesn't last very long. And then from, late November on, it's just dark all the time. You get about right at the peak, right about 3.5 hours of daylight is it. So about 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., give or take. So
Now, my first concern, because I should now be a little more grateful, would be thinking about, so I get a little bit of the winter blues every year, with it getting dark out earlier and things like that. And I complain about that, and I can feel the effects of that. Do you feel like such extreme difference going from complete lightness all the time to complete darkness all the time? Do you feel like it affects your mental health at all?
well, I grew up here, so I'm kind of just used to it, but definitely right by January, February, well, up here, everybody's over it because January, February is also weirdly enough the coldest. So I think this year in mid-February, we were getting down to 10 below pretty regularly. And also it's dark, and also there's no good fruit in the stores, and everybody's tired of wearing 17 layers of crap just to go out and start their car or like go get the mail. So I think everybody kind of goes through that period of just being over it. And then pretty quickly after that, we turn the corner, but it can be a little bit of rough going. But I mean, you find ways to cope. Being outdoors is definitely one of them, even if it's cold. Going to the gym is definitely one of them. Just trying to keep yourself active.
Yeah,
So
and to keep yourself on a schedule so that you're tired and going to bed when you actually need to be, because I would imagine it's a little bit difficult when it's completely bright outside to be like, oh, it's 9 o'clock. I need to go to bed. And, the sun's still out. And like you said, kids aren't going to be
no.
cooperative with that.
No, the kids do not care. The kids think that there is no bedtime. It should never happen in the summer. We try, but we also give them quite a bit of freedom to just sort of stay up and run amok, as long as the amok is just in our yard and not everybody else's. So you will hear people riding bikes and hooting and hollering until midnight, and that is not abnormal up here at all.
I mean, in a way, that's kind of nice, because I think, big issue in our society is the inactivity in our youth. Just because they have more access to screen time, that not through any fault of parenting, it's just the way of the world. There's a game and there's phones and everything's online, so kids are in front of their screens more. So I guess on the flip side, I think you'd rather your kid be outside riding their bike and being active, even if they should be in bed. I'd probably rather them be doing that than sitting in front of their computer.
We try to keep them outside, and we try to keep them off of that stuff as much as possible. It's definitely easier in the summer because you can be like, look how nice it is. You're missing
Yeah,
this,
now
right?
you're like pushing them out into the wilderness and it's cold. Like, that take a little bit of convincing on my part.
Need to go get some more vitamin D. You could store it up.
Now, well, that's the other thing I was wondering. I mean, when it goes to complete darkness, do people take vitamin D supplements there? Is that kind of a
Oh
thing?
yeah, vitamin D, vitamin B. People get happy lamps, which is a UV lamp like you would use
Yes.
for your plants, your house
I thought
plant.
about getting that for myself for my
Yeah,
small case of the winter blues, and now I feel kind of ridiculous saying that, because my winter does not seem so bad compared to yours.
there's people there. There are people that run them and they plug them in and they don't unplug them until spring. Yeah, and it seems to help. There's a lot of talk about tanning being unhealthy, but up here a lot of people tan because it offsets the complete lack of any kind of sun for so long. Go into the indoor swimming pool if you can. Just kind of any kind of simulation of warm weather helps.
Now,
Vitamin.
I'm really curious how you manage running in these conditions, because I know, like, here the winter's not too bad. The only time I really use the treadmill is if it's like pouring rain or if it's icy outside, because I'm scared to death of falling, because I've done that before and resulting in stitches and things like that. But how do you run as much as you do dealing with the conditions you're dealing with?
You suck it up and you go outside in the garbage. I usually run twice a day, so
Oh,
at no
wow.
point when I'm running usually is it light out. So I'll run in the morning and then again in the afternoon, and I try to do one outdoors at least. So in the wintertime, that generally involves like schlepping my giant bag full of winter gear to my office and then bundling up during work and running from my office. I run around town and then I have to come back in and take all of my winter gear off. So you get a lot of very odd looks. We run with headlamps. Some of the most
That's
fun,
what I was wondering about is if,
uh,
like, because I would be scared of falling. That's usually like one of my fears is falling. And I mean, have you?
oh,
Has it happened?
oh
Okay.
yeah, you
So
fall.
you kind of just have to embrace it.
You kind of just have to embrace the suck. Yes, that's sort of the ultra running motto. Is like, well, this isn't great, but it's also not terrible. Um, so you fall, you post hole. If it's dumping snow, is usually not a great time to go out. It can be really, really cold, or it can be yeah, it can be blowing snow and windy. So it's just kind of deal with it. We all probably spend way more money than we should on winter gear of all kinds, and particularly like long underwear, which is not a thing I ever before I started ultra running really. Like even though I grew up here, I was just like, all right, whatever, snow pants. And then I started ultra running in the winter and was like, I'm just really into thermal underwear right now, guys.
This is
Like
my new hobby.
I need
I
them to
really
be
am about
I need them to
thermal
be
underwear.
expensive. Yeah, expensive and designer. People are like, "Why?" I'm like, "'Cause I don't wanna get hypothermia." So, like, you develop these really weird, like, penchants for things, like, your taste like, you don't really care, you just wanna be warm. Um, but, that being said, some of the most fulfilling and beautiful races that I do are winter races too. So, 'cause we don't really have much of a choice.
I'm sure on the positive side, there is like a sense of solitude and the quiet. Like it's probably a good time for, just your personal, thoughts and having your quiet time. So I guess that's the plus side if you're going to find a silver
Yeah.
lining in it. And it probably is visually very pretty.
It definitely is, and it's you just gotta get out there and do it anyway, and, we hike in the winter sometimes too, and, all of our boys, love skiing, and their dad's a snowboarder, so this is definitely winter paradise for people who are into that kind of thing. I can stay upright on skis for about 20 minutes, so it's not my thing, but I'm very proud of all of you who can who
Yeah,
can
I
do.
haven't. I'm thinking about trying it next year. I just found out one of my running friends is a ski instructor, and I'm like, how have I not taken you up on this before? So maybe next year I will try it and see what all the hype is about. I don't think snowboarding is in my future, though. That doesn't seem like anything I'm capable of. I am not the coordinated type. Now, I'm very curious. Do you use on your sneakers in the like if it's snow and icy out? Because I know a lot of people here do in Jersey, like especially on trails. Do you use yak tracks on your sneakers at all?
No, so those are actually not, they're not intense enough. So what I would recommend, even in Jersey, because it does probably get, slick, cold, icy, what
Yeah.
I recommend are, I race in winter in all-in-one shoe, which is the Solomon Speed Spike. So that is a shoe with a Gore-Tex upper. It uses that Solomon quick lace system. So it's partially waterproof, and then there's actually studs in the sole. So, a lot of us use those clear from fall when it starts to get icy all the way up through right now. It just finally melted off like 2 weeks ago ish was when it finally stopped like freezing at night. You can also get what are called catulas or nano spikes. So there's like a chain and you set your shoe in the chain, your regular shoe, and then you bind those up, and it's an actual, it's almost like a mini climbing crampon. So those are for some really icy conditions, like snow conditions, where you really have to be able to dig your toe in. Yak tracks probably can work, but for most of us, they don't hold up to the amount of miles that we're
That's
putting on those
my
shoes.
dad, because we talked about this in the office. We worked together, and he's a runner. And I'd asked him over the winter. I'm like, I'd like to get out there more when it's, when it is snowing, but I don't want to fall. And I had thought about the yak tracks, and he's like, yeah, I probably wouldn't bother with them. But now that I know there's like an all-in-one shoe, that seems up my alley.
So there's
especially
another brand
because
called
it's
Ice
easy.
Bug that we use, and they make some actually really cute ones. Same thing, they have anything from a full Gore-Tex waterproof upper to a partial with the studs in the sole, or just like a waterproof shoe with really thick cleats. So those are the two kind of all-inclusive winter brands. And just encourage people to try those out because that way you're not buying like all of this extra gear. But the Yak Tracks, because they're rubber, like the rubber doesn't hold up to a lot of mileage. So
Well,
you'd
this
be
is why I'm glad I had you on, because I honestly know not a lot about ultra running, because that's new territory for me, and also like running in different types of conditions. Like I always just venture inside when it's really bad out because I've fallen very badly before, so I'm now a chicken. Um, but the sneakers, besides the fact that you need, the spikes on the bottom, the whole waterproof aspect, because that's where you're going to run into a problem pretty quickly, especially where you are, where it's below freezing. If your feet get wet, you're screwed.
wet feet or cold feet. So there's a lot of us that run in just straight up wool. So straight up wool socks, because those are
Yes.
actually the most water resistant. And then if they do get wet, your feet are still going to stay warm. So I run in like a full on calf length. It's actually a hunting brand. So Browning wool, like a wool blend sock in the winter. Some people swear by Dry Max socks. I'm a huge fan of just like, I think if you're just a human in general and you're feeling a little bit down, like you should just go buy yourself some really nice socks because they're pretty great
Isn't
and
it a weird
it
thing?
feel better.
Like a new pair of socks, it's I guess if you're really active, it gives me a lot of joy. Like I like just for
Yes.
like regular running, Belega. Like I got
Mhm.
those for Christmas, and like I'm so excited every time I put them on because they're cushioned and they're new. But yeah, for whatever reason, new socks really will put you in a
Yeah.
good mood.
Like some people are like, I'm gonna go to the salon. I'm gonna go get my nails done. I'm like, Mwah. I'm gonna go buy myself like a matching pair of darn tufts and put them on and just walk around my house. And like my boyfriend likes to make fun of me because I wear slipper socks all the time. And I'm like, okay, well, listen, have you tried them?
They're effective.
Have you
Yes.
tried them to improve your mood? Come on. Like nice
I
squeeze.
have I have one old pair left, because I got like new slippers and stuff for Christmas, but I have this one pair of slipper socks, and they're in the corner of my drawer. And when nobody else is home and it's just me, because they're old now, I pull them out, and I love them because they've got the non-skid on the bottom, and they're just
Yep,
perfect. But they're old, so they're not cute. But that's like my secret comfy look when nobody's around.
definitely. Same here. Sweatpants and slipper socks. I mean, falling in straight up like mom territory over here. But so yeah, Darn Tough is another great brand. I just think if you're out in the weather too, just for everybody, who maybe thinks that they can't do it, those shoes will help. Having a really solid, a stud or a set of those little micro spikes, and they're not too terribly pricey. They're anywhere from $50 to $90. You can get them on Amazon. And just, people are super worried about being cold. So I have Raynaud's syndrome, which means I have horrible capillary refill. I have horrible circulation. I'm always cold. I love it in this closet because it's nice and warm.
Your
Like
cloffice, as you call it,
office, yes.
her
So
closet office.
it's my beautiful professional space. So I have really hard time like staying warm, period. Wool definitely helps. The right socks definitely help. But the two places where if you are either under, right, you're cold all the time, or you're overheating, is your head and your hands. So a really good solid pair of gloves or mittens and a really, really good solid head cover, and then a buff around your neck, but also something that you can easily like take off if you overheat. Those two things are going to regulate your body temperature much more rapidly than your core layer. So you want to be able to leave your core layer on and then cool off or warm up by putting things on your head, putting mittens on, because you don't want to be like stripping down out of your clothes in the cold. And once you sweat inside an outer layer, once you take it off is when you're going to start getting colder. So that's going to wick away and evaporate. So it's better to keep that outer layer on and then just change up what you have on your hands and your head.
And for the gloves, actually, I remember my dad was training for. It was I forget if it was down in North Carolina, but it was during the winter, so it was going to be really cold, and it was like 20 miles up a mountain and 20 miles back down. And so he wanted like specific gear, like you're talking about. And for the gloves, I call them they're lobster gloves because there's no individual fingers on them, but it was to keep his hands really warm. And I guess they work. I haven't tried them personally, but yeah, I apparently, gloves make a big difference, especially in elements like that when you're freezing to death. But I'm now again even more impressed knowing that you have it's called Raynaud's. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Raynaud's syndrome. It's fairly common. Yeah.
Well, I learned about it a couple years ago only because I do cryotherapy, especially if I'm like training for something just for muscle recovery. And a friend of mine's like, no, 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 I can't do that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't circulate, my hands will not be okay. So I can't imagine running in the temperatures that you do having that condition because that's like 10 times harder to deal with, especially out like in elements like that where it's already kind of difficult to regulate your body temperature. So gear is probably super, super important to you.
It
At least
is.
having the right stuff.
Just knowing your body too. It took me a really long time actually to figure out because I just assumed other people were fine. I was like, what's wrong with my body? Why won't why are my hands freezing? And that's exactly, and I've, likely just had it my whole life. I get cold way quicker than most people, especially like my feet and my hands. You just kind of have to learn what works for you and then make sure not to get to the point where you're already cold. And the same thing goes for being like super overheated, because once you're super overheated, you start to dehydrate, you start to feel woozy, you feel gross. Just pay attention to your body and get a few pieces of that really good gear and keep them in your bag of tricks, and you'll be good to go.
Now, I'm not super familiar with ultra running. Like my furthest distance so far is 30 miles. I did it on my 30th birthday, which has now prompted me to become curious about ultra running, which I believe we met in a Facebook group for, I think is it trail and ultra running?
Trail and ultra, yes.
So, that's where I'm going to kind of like peek at everybody's training, see what they do, and become familiar with it because I think it's a different type of running. It's challenging, but in so many different ways because you just don't think your body can basically keep going for that long. And I mean, for the distances like, like a 100-miler, you're up for over 24 hours. And that's really training your body to prepare for a whole different kind of hurt mentally and physically. What was your first ultra and what made you decide to do that?
So I have very little sense of self-preservation, actually. I would not say, hey, go do this because it's offered to you. But so I became part of a really great group, and they're nationwide too. And if somebody's looking for just a running group to join, get themselves motivated, Team RWB, which stands for Team Red, White, and Blue, which is a veterans engagement group. You do not have to be a veteran or a service person to join. It's just a group to get support for veterans, raise awareness, and kind of shepherd them into some activities. And so they do a ton of races up here. So as part of this Team RWB group, and there's a race up here called Anchorage Run Fest, which is a 49K, which is actually 30 miles, just like you did. It's like 30.2.
So I guess I can technically say I've done an ultra,
yes.
like on the baby spectrum.
You have advanced to the ultra distance. So it's like a 49K because Alaska's the 49th state. But
Cool.
And then they have a marathon and a half and a all the way down to a 5K. So RWB gets a lot of free entries because of the type of group that it is, and so in our Team RWB Facebook group, somebody was making a bunch of noise. They were like, well, we have a bunch of free entries, does anybody want one? And I was kind of sitting there like clicking and scrolling. I was like, meh, no, whatever. And this has been going on for like weeks. And so I was kind of ignoring it. And then finally it came down to having one free entry left. And somebody made a post in the Facebook group. They were like, we have one free entry left for the 49K ultra. And, we just really hate to waste it. Does anybody want it? And it was like crickets. And I was like, okay. So I told him I would take it. So the furthest I had run to that point was marathon distance. And mind you, at the time, like I was not in good shape, period. Like I was not in really great running shape either. I had my son in 2014, and sometimes it takes you a hot minute to kind of like take the baby weight off. So I was like, okay, whatever. Let me see if I can do this without keeling over. So I just accepted this free entry on a whim completely. It ended up being an absolute blast. Jeff Galloway actually comes up and does Run Fest every year. He's at the expo. He hosts the spaghetti feed. Jeff Galloway is the Olympian, former Olympian, who basically turned the run walk method into a household method where
Oh,
you
yes. Okay. Yep.
do the intervals. And so he was up there. And so I was just like, well, I don't really know what I'm doing and I'm slow. So I just want to finish. And so I ended up tagging on with Jeff's group because he was running with the Galloway running group from Anchorage, Alaska, which is where the race is. And it was just an absolute blast. And it was hard. It was kind of rainy and it was kind of chilly, but we all finished, we all Galloway method with Jeff Galloway, and everybody in that group crossed the finish line. And, it was just a really great feeling. And I thought, well, okay, like that didn't kill me. And it was, it was actually easier than I thought it was going to be, which is easy as a relative term, obviously, but, what's next? So got started
Yeah. And
thinking like, the worst thing that's going to happen is I'm not going to finish this. Right.
yeah, and you did. So I think that's a pretty natural thing with runners. Once we do one thing, we're like, your immediate feeling afterwards is like, oh my gosh, I just want to go home and lay down. I want to eat something. I want to drink something. And then, like, either a few hours later or the next morning, you're back online. Like, well, if I did that, let me see if I can find another race coming up and see if I can either do better, further, go faster. But yeah, it's like a weird sickness with runners that we seem to have amnesia of the pain that we incur during the race and then immediately want to sign up for something else, the next day.
It's sort of that, well, it didn't kill me, so now what sort of mentality.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
what can I do now?
Yep, yep. And you will have moments where you question your own sanity, but usually you end up, yeah, clicking on the next thing and run sign up or ultra sign up or wherever.
Now, a lot of people, so technically, if you look like Google, what is ultra running? They kind of define it as anything over the distance of a traditional marathon, which is 26.2 miles. So anything past that can be considered an ultra, but most of the popular and main ultra race distances, I would think, are 50Ks, 100Ks, 50 milers, and 100 milers. And you are in the 100 miler club.
I just recently joined the 100 Miler Club. So I would say in running circles, the generally accepted definition is a 50K, which is 31.2 miles.
I love
So
how we know that as runners. We know these weird random distances. 5K, 3.1, 10K, 6.2. Only in running would you know like both conversions, miles and,
metric.
kilometers.
Yeah. Yep. I don't know if anybody would ever ask that of you, otherwise, right? But hey, it helps. It's your random trivia knowledge. You can convert. It's not a thing that most Americans can do. Um, but yeah, so I did that one. And then, I mean, my absolute favorite format that I fell into next is I ended up pacing a friend the following summer. It would be fixed time. So fixed time essentially is you just sign up for time. So usually 6 hours, 12 hours, 24. You can get fixed times that are all the way up to 36 and 48 hours. There are what's called multi-stagers, which are multiple days. But a fixed time generally is you just run. You just run. So you pick your time and you try to either stay on your feet the entire time or you pick a mileage goal and you try to hit it. So I do several of those every year. And then, had kind of started thinking maybe about the 100-mile distance after I completed 100K, which is 62.5
Yeah, because
miles.
that would be the next logical step, even though it's quite a big jump, 100K to 100 miles. It's, there's a fair amount of distance, but in the world of ultras, that's probably the next step.
Yeah, you don't really take little steps in ultra. You tend to just sort of go for it, obviously, which is how we all end up the way we are with like missing toenails and just eating loaves of bread for dinner. Um, so yeah, so I just really want to try one, but there are no 100-mile races here in the spring or in the summer. There's one in the fall, which is fairly remote. And then the rest of them actually are winter hundreds, which just was out of the question for me. I was like, no. But there is a spectacularly offbeat group of trail runners called the Yeti Trail Runners. It's run by a guy named Jason Green. A lot of people have already heard of the David Goggins 48-hour challenge. So that's where you run 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours, which is horrible.
Oh, yes, they had this, I believe I saw these pop up online during COVID because it was a way for
Yeah.
people just to kind of be connected and just challenge themselves, especially
Yeah.
being home so much.
So the Yeti Trail Runner. So Jason Green did a version of that, and you got a little swag box and everything. There was also the Yeti 24-hour, which is 5 miles every 4 hours for 24 hours, which I can personally attest was also horrible, and I will never do it again. But then Jason Green came up with the Yeti 100-miler. So I decided to sign up. So
Yes,
essentially,
logically.
just a virtual 100-miler, and once the clock starts, you don't stop. So you can take as long, up to, I think it was 36 hours was the cutoff. You could, if you were past that, then it was technically, didn't finish. But other than that, it's completely up to you. So I just thought, well, why not? Why not go for it? And so we ended up doing it last October. It's about 20 degrees out for the majority of that. Mostly dark.
Which is probably for you not that bad. The rest of us are,
No.
freezing in that kind of temperature.
It was dry still because it was only October, and it was clear out, meaning not raining or cloudy, and there was no snow on the road. So we were happy as clams. That's about as good as it gets, even though it was cold. And that took about 31 hours, 31 and a half. We did take one 45-minute cat nap because it was becoming absolutely necessary, and then just didn't really push ourselves real hard to get out of the aid station and get going again. But so start to finish, yeah, it was about 48 hours of no sleep.
See, I think that's probably the part for people listening that is they're trying to wrap their heads around that. Do you think that you acquire that ability through training or really sheer mental determination once you're there and doing it?
You just have to fight with yourself. A lot of it is doing these shorter distances, where 50 miles, 100K, where you get a taste of it, and just trying not to sleep, trying not to sit down for too long. It helps to have good crew. When I did the Yeti 100-miler, I had, my boyfriend was here making biscuits and gravy at 4 a.m. and ridiculous stuff like that, trying to cycle through the aid station part of it and get back out on the road. But yeah, the rest of it it's just 100% mental. And I mean, if you look at the top ultra runners kind of the world over, they don't sleep. Courtney DeWalter, who is one of the first women to make it as far as she has in the Barkley, she won the Moab 240, which is just insane. It's 240 miles in the Moab desert. She beat out all the men. Maggie Gutterall, who won Big's Backyard, Amelia Boone, Devi Nienko, Killian Jornet, who's somebody that everybody's heard of. She broke onto the scene at age 20. Just, this crazy young guy. They don't sleep. They make it a point to not be sitting down long enough to get to that point because it's really hard to come back from. Another thing that you can do if you're looking at trying to do something like this is that Yeti 24-hour challenge or the Goggins 48-hour challenge where you have a huge break. So you have a 4-hour gap in between when you finish one leg and start the next one. You could go to sleep.
So you can build yourself up to that point.
Correct. But what you're doing is forcing your body out of stasis, basically. And really that's what most running training, whether it's a half, a marathon, even getting faster at your 5K time, is letting your body drop back into a state of rest and then forcing it out.
Pushing
When
it.
when you're crying and bargaining with God to not make you get back up off the couch, which I have done many, many times. You get tired, you fatigue your body, and then you go back out the next day, or you do 2 runs a day. So where rest days are incredibly important, but it's after you've had a cycle of 3 or 4 days of just pushing your mileage and pushing your body out of that fatigue point.
What kind of tips would you give for somebody going into their first live in-person ultra, where there are, cruise and aid stations, but what kind of like fueling tips? Because I find fueling is definitely different for an ultra as compared to, like a marathon.
I think they can be similar, but I think it depends again on your body. So I absolutely cannot subsist on like gels and stuff. It
Oh,
really
thank
messes
you.
with my gut. They're horrible. Also, they're disgusting.
I hate them. I'm so glad that you feel the same way. I just don't
There's
like them, which
no,
is kind of
no,
where I learned by doing the 30 miler because I was doing it on my own and at a slower pace. I decided to try out different snacks and
yes,
found that having like real foods like,
yes.
pretzels and things like that actually worked better for me than trying to consume these, fuel sources like gels that they try to push on marathoners. I just
Ugh,
don't like them. And so
they're
I'm beginning to
nasty.
think
Yeah.
real food is where it's at. Like, handful of pretzels, some Cheez-Its,
Yeah.
I'd
Oh,
rather have that.
so I run fasted quite frequently. So I've run anywhere from like 5K all the way up to marathon distance without eating. And that's like stopping eating at like 7:30 the preceding night, which actually works really well. That's probably a little bit more of an advanced technique, but a lot of that is also because like runner TMI, like
Oh,
gels
oh,
mess with your gut. Like really
yeah, yeah, that's another reasson I can't have them. I have a very sensitive stomach.
correct.
Every which way, and I've had every emergency imaginable happen to me.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah, I don't like to eat a huge breakfast that morning before a marathon, and I get lectured about it a lot, but I'm like, "No, just give me, like, a small half bagel with a little bit of peanut butter, and that's about
Yep.
all I can tolerate."
Absolutely. And I think like what you eat the night before, you've always the myth or the fable of like carbo loading and you eat like this big spaghetti dinner the night before, like do that, but don't do it too late at night, And so I think
Because
it's
you're not
really
gonna digest it. Oh
to
my god.
like maybe run a shorter distance and like yeah, like not eat anything before and then start eating different snacks and see how it hits your gut. For me, I can't do the gels, it's too much sugar. I can intersperse them as long as that's not all that I'm eating, but I really highly recommend broth cubes, bouillon cubes.
Oh,
Like
wow.
you're gonna do a super long run, like fill a refillable with some broth, and it'll get cold, but it's not the end of the world. Or immediately after your run, drink some broth. For long runs, they have it at aid stations. And yeah, definitely real food, like peanut butter. We eat a ridiculous amount of bacon up here. Like we have a legitimate bacon and grilled cheese aid station at these races that one of our groups does. Um, Somebody usually to those fixed times will bring like a veggie curry and rice. Like real food is crucial. And so I think that's a huge point is like what your body runs on in a normal day is optimally what it should be running on during a run. Maybe not as much of it, cut out the dairy, that kind of thing, but what does your body run best on normally? That's what you should
Definitely no dairy.
right?
Nope. Nope.
For the
Nope.
obvious reasons, yes.
Oh, yeah. I had ice cream the night before once, not even thinking of it. Because it was only like, I think it was only a 5 or 10 miler, so it wasn't anything crazy. Didn't even really consider it. Bad choice. Very bad choice. Made it through the race, but it was painful.
We learn from our mistakes the hard way. Yes.
So we're actually going to start wrapping up this segment of the episode because we're actually going to have a part two because Michelle just has tons that we can pick her brain about. So be sure to stay tuned for next week's episode, and we'll have Michelle back to discuss
Yay.
topics like foraging. If you've never heard about this, because this is all new to me, foraging. I am fascinated by this, as well as how we use running as a form of therapy for ourselves and coping through difficult times. So we will be back for next week's episode. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
And to learn more about Michele Harmeling and follow her ultra running journey, you can find her on Instagram at Pucky Pie Photography. PUCKYPIE Photography.